Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's seminar hosted by the Berkeley Pharmatech Foundation. My name is Van Nguyen, and I'm the founder of the nonprofit. Our mission is to increase access for scientists and entrepreneurs in biotech through education, mentorship, and professional opportunities. We're privileged and honored to be sponsored by the Ernie McNabb Foundation. To get involved, follow us on LinkedIn for updates. Stay tuned for our upcoming seminars and conferences, and feel free to reach out to me to explore more ways to engage with our mission. Today, please join me in welcoming Tara Ghazi, Ph.D., a cognitive neuroscientist and entrepreneur working at the intersection of brain science, medical imaging, and women's health. She's the co-founder of MALCOVA, an early-stage deep tech company developing next-gen diagnostic imaging technologies. Her work focuses on advancing solutions for challenging clinical needs, such as breast cancer detection in dense breast tissue and brain imaging for stroke. Tara's scientific expertise centers on how humans perceive, process, and remember visual spatial information. She earned her BA in cognitive science from University of California, Berkeley, and later completed her PhD in psychological and brain sciences at Johns Hopkins University. Please join me in welcoming Tara.
Thank you so much, Van. I will go ahead and share slides to frame our talk. Good morning, everyone. Really appreciate you all being here today, and thanks for that kind introduction. I'm Dr. Tara Ghazi. As Van mentioned, I'm the co-founder and chief business officer of MALCOVA, and we are, as she said, a deep tech medical imaging technology company. We've been really laser focused on solving needs in early stage breast cancer diagnostics since our founding. We've been working on that for a little over 5 years now. And for those of you who are in the entrepreneurial space, you'll know how critical it is to make that shift from startup to successful business to be laser focused and to really make traction on the problem that exists and impacts a lot of people. So that's where I'll just begin the conversation today. I see there are a number of, I imagine, women identifying individuals, in the room today. For those of us who are familiar with breast cancer and its incidence, there's been incredible success in awareness campaigns for a number of years that have really educated many of us, even from an early age, on just how prolific breast cancer is. And so if you're a woman, your physician, once you reach a certain age, is going to recommend that you go in for screening on a regular basis every 1 to 2 years or so, in the hopes that with that screening, we'll be able to detect your possible breast cancer at an early stage when we can treat it most effectively. But the state of affairs today is that for many of us, we are recommended to screening, we go in for that, and we may be told afterwards that, given the technology we have available to us, we cannot be sure, right? There are limitations, and you're left with a great deal of uncertainty. You don't necessarily know if you may have cancer, and if that cancer may be growing. You don't know if you have kind of a clean slate and it's not something to worry about. So there's a huge problem for many women because of this. The images that I'm showing you on screen here, these are mammograms. They are the output of the primary medical imaging technology used for breast cancer screening and diagnosis, and that's mammography. And for this woman on the left here, the technology is really effective. Cancer, it shows up. It's quite different from the rest of her tissue. It looks different. Even a layperson, we don't need to be experts in the space, can see, oh, there's something that's going on here. But when you look at this woman and her tissue on the right here, you can see it's a very different picture. It's a very different landscape. There are many regions that are very opaque. It's hard to really know what is a normal pattern of tissue and what is not. And this is the problem that at MALCOVA we've been really working to solve since our founding. I'll return to this a little bit more, but kind of say, a bit about my own journey in getting to this space. It's not a traditional linear path that I had. I started my own career in industry, an entirely unrelated field. I was in technical, analytical, managerial roles in the insurance and service sectors. I worked in very large corporations such as Safeco, Liberty Mutual, all the way to very small businesses, and had a career for more than a decade in which I developed a great deal of skill in a lot of areas that prove helpful to me today. But at that time, I was not incredibly gratified by my professional life. I was good at it, but it wasn't bringing me joy and satisfaction and meaning. Since childhood, I had really loved science, and I had found that throughout my life, I was very interested in people and understanding a bit more about them. And I was also, for many years, a hobbyist photographer. So I had kind of a passion for looking at images and analyzing them and being quite intentional about visual things in nature, both in composing them and then in processing them afterwards. And so I reached a certain point in my professional life when I made the choice to return to the pursuit of my education. And so I shifted away from industry and went back to academia full time. And that led me to pursue my PhD at Johns Hopkins University. I specialized in cognitive neuroscience there. And because of these interests that I'm explaining, I made the decision and chose to really focus on understanding how the brain gives rise to us as humans and our processing of visual information, how it is that we look at things that are visual, perceive that, make meaning of it, the different ways that the nature of our brain and being human in our experiences can change the way we interpret that information and take it in. And these insights have proven very critical when we translate that back into MALCOVA's pursuit as a medical imaging technology company. So I'll return here to the images on screen, these mammograms. So when you're going in for breast cancer screening with a technology like this, the intention is that these images are produced and they're given to a radiologist, a highly trained human physician who specializes in reading medical images to extract information from them. We rely on that human, but the human, the radiologist, relies on what the technology is giving them in order to get that information out of it. And so when we look at these two images here, again, even a layperson can see there's something going on the left, but for this woman on the right, uh, it is incredibly hard for anybody to really tell if something's going on. This woman did indeed have cancer in this area, but this region that was cancerous is almost impossible to distinguish from the rest of her tissue, which is healthy. Now, this woman is described as having a dense breast. That terminology has arisen because of the way this woman's tissue looks on mammography and the way so many women's breast tissue presents in mammography. It's opaque, dense, and healthy tissue shows up looking just like cancer can, and so it can be really hard to distinguish. So mammography's ability to detect cancer in this woman, a woman with dense breasts, can be worse than a coin flip. And that's a massive problem. It's really a large problem in part because of how many women have dense breast tissue. So in the US, with our very diverse and heterogeneous population, up to 50% of women have dense breasts. When you look to other areas in the world, like East Asia, South Asia, that number is 60% and upwards and becomes commonplace. So for women today who have dense breasts, what happens is that they are presented with either a false sense of security, and they may have a cancer that is growing and perhaps spreading, or they may be presented with, if they can afford it, a chance to have additional imaging with different types of technologies. Very common among them is recommended additional imaging with an imaging technology called ultrasound. And ultrasound, instead of presenting a very nice, almost photograph like we're looking at here with mammography, it's using sound waves that are giving information that's presented to the radiologist visually, but it's far from a picture. It can be very difficult to interpret. The way the signal presents can change depending on the person who's collecting that data, called the technologist. And so it can lead to a lot of ambiguity and uncertainty. And what happens in these cases is that if there is too much uncertainty, but still cause for concern, a woman can be then referred to multiple rounds of imaging, repeated, and eventually biopsy in order to get a definitive answer. In the US, 80% of biopsies that are done on the breast come back negative for cancer. So that's a really large number of biopsies being performed, which are minor surgical procedures. They're minor in the landscape, but they are significant, they're expensive, and they do take time to recover from, so it's not trivial. That's a huge number that are being done that might be unnecessary if you had better imaging information to start with. And so at MALCOVA, this has really been our focus to develop and bring to women and to the clinics and hospitals a technology that is far more effective for imaging of dense breast tissue. And so instead of telling women you need to go through multiple types of things, you may have to pay quite a bit out of pocket to get answers. We really believe that it should be a single, very effective solution that is giving you answers and taking you there. So this is really the impetus of what we do. So now I'll get kind of into the science of at MALCOVA, how it's different what we're doing than others. And to do that, I'm going to give you a little bit of background on how this type of medical imaging works. I'm going to call this class, which mammography falls into, photon-based medical imaging. So unlike what I described as ultrasound using sound waves to collect information inside the body, when we use photons or light to image inside the body, we emit them from a particular source. These photons pass through the portion of the body that we're interested in imaging, and then they get detected. And the signal that's detected is then turned into an output image. And so this is all kind of, sophisticated computers, and many decades of technology has led to this type of process. But that output image, we're really looking to gain these insights into what's hidden inside the body, what's going on inside the human. And it's a really incredible power to be able to do that, not just to be able to try and diagnose from the outside, but to actually see what's going on within. One of the challenges in photon-based imaging, however, is just the actual physics of doing so. What happens when you pass photons through a person or any object you're trying to image is that some of those photons, they interact and they scatter off into random directions instead of passing through cleanly. Now, when they're detected, the detector knows what it expected. They expect this nice clean location to pass through, and that this information collected in this particular area of the detector should correspond to this part of the body. And so when you have randomly scattered information that detector is collecting, it's incorrect signal originating from an unpredictable portion of that person. And it creates contamination in that output image. It can create noise in the signal, misinformation, lost information. What it's doing is it's just altering that output image. And when we're in the medical imaging space, this is very problematic because we rely on fidelity of that signal. We want to get an accurate representation of what is actually happening in the body in order to use that information to understand and to detect, and then ultimately, hopefully, to diagnose if there's something problematic. So my co-founder, a scientist with deep expertise in physics and medical imaging, he and I joined forces on this problem, and he had very unique insights into the relationship between medical imaging technologies and this scatter problem, and just how big a problem it was. And so MALCOVA, our core technology, is a reinvented imaging technology that nearly eliminates this kind of scatter contamination from imaging. What it allows us to do is to still use this beautiful photon-based imaging where you can get almost these photographs of the inside of the body that are very clear and readily interpretable by a human, but to gather very clean raw data in the signal that we collect. By doing that, we're able to have very safe, low levels of exposure to the patient while imaging, but collect a very rich amount of data. And we do that not just in this single two-dimensional imaging procedure of mammography, but we do it in multiple dimensions, moving around the breast tissue. And we collect a number of different types of information that we can synthesize and present to the radiologist to help give them a far more complete picture of what's going on in the body. This here is the product vision that we are working towards that we call the breast monarch. It's a very new, novel way of positioning and performing imaging. In mammography, the standard for those women in the audience who've been through it, or for those who might be familiar, is we walk up to a device, we have our breast positioned on a plate, and it gets compressed between two plates so that that mammogram can be taken. For many women, this can be an uncomfortable to a painful experience. And that's particularly the case for women. The denser their breasts are, there's often a relationship between the discomfort or pain they experience and that density. In our approach, it's not enough to just develop a more effective technology for the radiologist, the clinician, but we really want to solve this problem of uncomfortable imaging for women and reduce this barrier. We know that up to 20% of women will avoid going in for screening simply because they're avoiding a painful procedure. They don't want to have that done. They don't want that experience. And so on our pathway of development, it's been very critical to shape this technology in a way that is very comfortable for women to use so that we reduce that barrier and we can increase access to early screening for all women. Now, on our journey, we have gone through many prototypes in developing this. I'll show you, this is our third generation prototype, and that's me positioned kind of on the hardware form of the interior of the device in parallel to what you have here. This silver region here that you see is what's emitting those photons, and it rotates around and it's angled down to capture all the breast tissue that goes back deep towards the chest wall and in the underarm area. And for the woman, your breast is just hanging freely. You can position yourself. It's very comfortable. And it's not, it doesn't feel as can be invasive, as other procedures can feel with this sensitive organ in our body. And it's very fast. Imaging happens in less than a minute, and we're collecting a great deal of information. So the goal is that for women, they're going into the clinic, they can have an effective, very quick imaging procedure done, and they have confidence that if there is something that needs to be followed up on, it will be detected and we can move forward. And if there's not, they don't have a host of imaging procedures in front of them that they need to worry over. This here shows really the inner workings of the technology. And so this kind of gives you a sense that there's a bit more complexity happening under the hood, so to speak. And that's really where the deep tech, aspect of our company comes into play. So, at MALCOVA, we've been working really in earnest. We were able to secure funding early on and get going, full time and build a team since 2021. And a huge part of our funding has been non-dilutive US federal government grant-based funding through funding programs that are available that are meant to help fund new technologies that have the potential to really impact public health for the positive on a large scale. And that is exactly the type of work that we are doing. This kind of funding mechanism is really critical because when you're in a deep tech space and you're developing something brand new science, technology that's never been seen before, there's a long period of research and demonstration and refinement and experimentation. And oftentimes for investors who are, say, in the venture space or angels, the earliest phases of those are just simply too risky for them when you're starting with a concept, even if a concept well grounded in science and reason. That pathway of years and the risk of development can just be a bit challenging for them. So having federal funding as a resource is really incredible. These are highly competitive funding programs. And so we at MALCOVA were very skilled in our grant writing approach and our ability to secure that, but also very fortunate to do so because there are many other scientists, entrepreneurs in the space who have pursued these things but not been so successful. So we are grateful, but do note that it takes a lot of dedication and work. When we were securing these and writing these grants, this was well before the time of AI-assisted, composition, and so it was a much more arduous and time-consuming process than it can be today. And it's a terrible thing when you think that just a failure in communication can prevent amazing ideas that have the potential to solve good from being able to be launched and get going on that pathway. Um, Another benefit that my co-founder and I experienced as entrepreneurs with this type of federal funding and support is that the government has shaped these programs over time for those who are awarded grants to open up additional training programs to them. Because for many of us who are scientists and then transition to entrepreneurialism, there's a great deal to learn, and there's a whole shift into the business world, the operations. Myself, because of the untraditional path I had much more root and grounding in the business world and a lot of core competency that was able to translate through. But even with that, there is a great deal to learn about the entrepreneurial path and what it takes to actually succeed. And so, access to training programs, to network, to mentorship, these things are really critical on the journey. Berkeley Pharmatech Foundation puts on pitch events. I think they have one coming up in a couple of weeks. These types of events where one can refine their storytelling, get feedback, just practice in the art of really communicating and discussing with others what it is you're doing. They're such valuable opportunities. And I know that we've certainly benefited on our journey as founders in taking advantage of such training. So other things that I will say that are interesting when you're in the deep tech space are that you have to rely on a great deal of expertise in your team members. It is a large job to go from concept, to actual execution. And we have right now an amazing, small, but really incredibly competent, skilled, very experienced team. Uh, in the entrepreneurial space, it's not enough just to have people who have expertise. They have to want to take on the risk of being part of a startup. It's something that may not be so stable. They're planning their 20-year career pathway, vision, and retirement. So that's a certain type of person who has the drive, the motivation, who typically, especially in a space like ours, is quite mission driven and finds great fulfillment from trying to help solve needs in the public space and wants to devote their work energies to doing something along these lines. And that team building is absolutely critical because they play such a strong role in your success. Because especially in the earlier phases, there are a lot of unknowns to solve. The dynamic among the team, the commitment, the creativity plays a huge role. And I would say that on our journey, some of the greatest joys as well as challenges have come and arisen from those team members. Sometimes it's hard to identify bad fits early enough, and you want to do everything you can to keep those good fits part of the team and in-house for as long as you can. So for us, uh, it's been an amazing journey thus far, and we're really right now at MALCOVA on the cusp of this incredible transition. So we are coming to a close in our R&D phase after really developing and proving and establishing the fit between the technology that we're working on and the need that we're working to solve. And now we're on the cusp of moving into the clinical phase. So this year we have our first in-human study upcoming at Yale University, our clinical partner there, where we'll be taking our device, studying that in a cohort of women, and then helping to define our pathway ahead to go through the regulatory path that will allow us to actually bring this device to market and into the clinic. And that itself is yet another part of the growth phase. So deep tech is a challenging but incredibly rewarding pathway in doing it. But it's also a long game, as most of the companies that Berkeley Pharma, tech will feature. These are things that have the potential to really make incredible changes for the future landscape of health, but they require a long pathway with quite a bit of rigor. And the regulatory side of it is no small matter and has to be taken into account quite early on. The goal really is that for all women, no matter what their breast tissue type is, they should have access to an effective imaging solution. They should be able to go into the clinic, get that information. Breast imaging is really critical and will always be a very critical diagnostic part, and it plays a role throughout the breast cancer journey. Breast cancer is not an incredibly loud signaler, so other methods, excuse me, blood detection or other things don't have as much promise in this particular space as they do for other types of cancer. So imaging and advances in this are just absolutely critical. And that's one of the reasons that we stay incredibly motivated and have high hopes for our success ahead. Okay, so I will go ahead and pause here and give my my throat a moment to catch up from that. Okay. All right. Van, so that is what I wanted to share. And yeah, happy to open it up in case anybody had any questions they wanted to dive into.
Thank you so much, Tara. That was very comprehensive. Just looking at how long your journey has been and how much your team has stuck to the project. Yeah, so I just want to open up the floor for anyone to ask questions, or even if you have comments, please feel free.
Tara, thank you very much. That was very comprehensive. And I love that your journey was not, this straight line from academia into this. Do you see that there might be other areas to which this can apply, not just in breast? I'd love to understand if there's other applications for this
Yeah,
technology.
lovely. Thanks so much for that question. Absolutely. So we have made great strides in this area. What our core technology is, this new form of imaging, is really a platform technology. And because it solves these fundamental needs in the core imaging process, there are other applications where it just readily translates. The next major clinical need that we have our eyes on is actually, close to heart for me as a cognitive neuroscientist, is in the brain, and that is in stroke imaging in particular. So today, what happens if you are presenting with signs of stroke is that you will often be, if you're fortunate enough to live next to or nearby a hospital and can get brought in for care, they have a very critical diagnostic pathway where they really need to triage one, is it stroke? And if it's stroke, what kind of stroke is it? There are two types of stroke, ischemic or hemorrhagic, and the treatment pathway for each, if you take the wrong one, it can be fatal. So, they're highly effective, but very critical for the right diagnosis. And the imaging that's used today is, excuse me, the imaging that's used today uh, often requires a lot of repeated rounds for them to collect enough information. And so a person can have many hours of repeated imaging and just waiting until things develop far enough that it can be seen. And our particular innovation in this space has the potential to really help shorten that gap and get to a much more rapid diagnosis and to reduce a lot of the unnecessary repeated imaging that people are put through. Stroke, interestingly, often presents very differently in women than it does in men. And so it can be most of the knowledge and evidence that we have is based on a history of studies in men. And that's kind of defined what the stereotypical symptoms are. And while that's true for men, it's not always the case for women. And so having a solution that can provide that critical input, especially for women, can be really key in getting to that early treatment and faster diagnosis. Uh, so those are in the medical imaging space, the two core things that we're focused on. Beyond that, interestingly, there are other applications for this type of imaging and the particular innovation that we have that apply when you're imaging different materials, and so in the non-human space. But at present, our aim has been strictly in medical imaging thus far. So, yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for that question, Deanna.
Thank you.
Hi there, Tara. Thank you for your presentation today. I've learned so much. A lot of these topics are hitting home for people that are impacted. You mentioned something about good fit versus bad fit for mission-driven companies. In terms of the good fit folks, how do you keep everyone focused? So there's obviously breast tissue, in imaging for that. You're talking about next phase, with the brain. How do you keep everyone focused and aligned on, what we're solving today versus what's coming tomorrow?
Yeah, communication is so key. And really, for us, very frequent cadence in lightweight check-ins and then deeper dives to ensure that all core members of the team really understand the long-term vision as well as the mid-road and the this week, right? This week and even this day. And it's such a core part of our culture to be collaborative. And so for those who we've found are mission driven and are good fits, there are many different personality types, but if people tend to like, to compete, and that's, very motivational for them, it tends not to be a good fit in our space because that can just create friction among a team that we need to be well oiled and working together. Uh, what we've heard as feedback, as leaders of our team over the years, is that people really like just signaling. They like regular check-ins, and that although we're a startup and dynamic, still also scheduling time for formal conversations and making space for employees is very critical. It's so important to understand if there is a barrier, in somebody's work experience that's causing distraction from the task at hand, and if it is something that can be remedied, with without massive change of course. It's very important to do that. We value our team, respect our team, and everybody is such a critical part of it. But we in a startup space, things can move quick and we can get focused, and it's important to not not lose sight of the fact that these are people's lives also passing by, and they're dedicating their life and their work energy towards this common cause, and to respect that and honor that and try to make it a positive work environment for them. Yeah. I will say sometimes easier said than done, but in practice, important to aim towards.
Especially because it's such a long journey, and there's lots of ebbs and flows, and then there's the race, and then the stagnant, middle ground portions of it. I agree.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing too. I have spoken with many entrepreneurs that are, say, strictly in the software space, and perhaps not in a regulated endeavor that may be producing consumer products. And it can be just a pure out sprint, right? Until they get to a goal. And there's a particular type of character who's motivated by that, who has the capacity, is at a stage in their life when that's a positive thing and that's something they want to engage in. We find that in deep tech, because you're on a long road and because you're doing something that requires high intention, high precision, great fidelity and execution, you want people to be running the marathon, right? And so the sprints do come, but those we try to space out or periodic and more often predictable than not. And so having the energy to step up for these short focal periods, but for the norm to be, okay, no, we're at the marathon pace and we need to stay in it. Uh, that's valuable when the team is aligned on that and the culture is created around that. Sometimes we have found that age can play a role and stage of career can play a role, but not definitively. There have been junior members where that's well aligned with what they're doing, but more so, our team is mostly composed of individuals that are a bit further on in their career and have a lot of expertise. And their life stage might also be such that their life is complete outside of their work. And so they are happy to focus their energies very intensely there, but then they appreciate a bit more balance. And so that can be the difference between those that are motivated to be in the startup realm because they want to sprint and they want that to consume their entire existence for a period of time. And that's gratifying for them. Yeah. So different goals, different character sets for sure.
Very well put, and thank you, Sarah.
Tara, thank you so much for your talk. Just wondering, I think you've heard of this phrase, rush to wait. So sometimes, you're doing a sprint and then you have to kind of stop and wait for a grant to come through or whatnot. How do you deal with that wait time, as a team? And what do you focus your energy on meanwhile as you're waiting for grants to come in?
I would say that in our history, we haven't yet hit a dead time where we didn't know what we were doing because there's always a backlog. So that is, but in the path to come, there, as we interface more and more with external groups and organizations, for instance, as we advance on our regulatory pathway, as we engage more deeply with clinical partners, there are others that you have to interface and you're working with their timelines. And so we tend to try and approach that strategically, where we front load things to make sure that we start those processes in case we need to hand the ball off to them. And then we can be, shifting attention back to other things that are needing to get done but weren't as urgently time sensitive, for instance. So there's a great bit of planning. And in cases where there is transparency, it's very helpful. So in regulatory engagement, for example, timelines are well defined. There is a certain range of time that it will take, and it is going to be pretty close to that, and you can rely upon it. So having these know that, okay, I'm going to front load efforts so that I can start that clock ticking, and then proceed on with other work that's at hand, really helps to maximize. Because we have a lot of potential but a small team, and as most startups are, particularly when it comes to in the longer pathway spaces, we have to be very capital efficient, creative, and we cannot spend money lightly. So that's frequently the case that we have many pursuits, we have a lot of strategy, but we are shifting our focus, and we can't always work in parallel on those things at one time. So it becomes strategic about, this is the most urgent thing right now. This is going to be the focus for this, week or this month, and then we'll be shifting gears to this other kind of focus and moving back and forth. It is beautiful when you have continuity and funding. I will say, as with most startups, earlier in our journey, we experienced our gaps, as many do, and you get creative with how you try to prevent those, how you try to overcome those. And I think as you proceed and progress down your journey, one of the things that we have certainly learned is that a year is tomorrow, when it comes to having funds lined up, that you really have to plan well in advance and be very proactive about how long it may take to line things up to secure that funding that you anticipate coming next. A strong example of that has been for us recently with this current administration. There were a lot of changes in grant-based funding that have occurred in the last year plus. For us, thankfully, we weren't immediately hit, but one of the funding programs that we rely on has undergone a real gap. And so there are periods where we have to come up with, plan B, plan C. We know that we cannot necessarily put all of our eggs in that, that particular basket, thinking that that's going to come to fruition. I would say there's a change in phase where at some periods that initial change can feel incredibly stressful, but then it becomes a bit of the norm, and you gain a little bit more control just by expecting that the horizon is less certain, and that can help with additional planning and contingency plans. We were very honored to have recently been featured in a Forbes magazine article that was actually talking about this exact issue with a particular funding program we've had access to, and it's been making its way through Congress in a very delayed fashion. And this article was a great call to action, using us as a case study of why these federal funding programs are just so critical for the future of public health. Himani?
Hi, Tara. First of all, the conversation was so good. I'm a physician from India, so I know what the problem actually we face with seeing the dense breast and not able to see the cancer in it. So it's a very exciting tool. So my question is around, like, since you said like you have people in your team, you have people with diverse experiences and like a lot of experiences. How do you deal with conflict management? Because since everyone is like very experienced, like how do you deal with it?
Yeah, it's we have been both fortunate and unfortunate in that it's never been mild. If it's happened in our history, the conflict has either been really extreme or it's been kind of steady. That makes it overt. I think something that is even more difficult is if you have hidden problems that lurk and that are small and that are harder to detect, or that people aren't as comfortable in talking about. That can really impact performance for one or more members of your team for a long time, and that's almost an insidious problem that's more challenging. Uh, we do encourage, above all, communication in our company, and that has to be directed. So it is important to respect that, depending on the type of the conflict that it is. Some people are wanting to address that directly with the other party. The other party may or may not be receptive to having that, discussion. So you do have to guide and aid these things. And so it tends to be a bit of information gathering first from any parties that are involved, and mediation and facilitating a bit of resolution is the goal to do it. In some cases, there will be situations where it's just a poor fit in the culture, and it doesn't happen to be that it's really, such an ugly situation, say between two people. It can be more so that overall there are many problems, and the person's just not quite happy in the culture, and it's not working out for them. And that sometimes can be a loud signal to help them come to realize that, as well as have the conversation, with leadership, so that we realize it as well and can, work on a transition out. But yeah, we're humans, right? We're humans. We work closely together. It always will arise. Because interestingly, because we work on a space that is, in essence, it's a very sensitive topic, when you're in healthcare, but not just that, but we're dealing with imaging of the breast. There's a very large bit of filtration that comes in before anybody is part of our team, where the only people joining clearly respect very much the human body, the subject matter we're dealing with, the importance of life, of respect, of women very generally. So there's a certain type of personality that leans into this, and this is meaningful work for them. And what we've found is that more often than not, that's somebody who, again, is aligned with the mission, finds real value in the work. And if the company is a good fit, they want to find a way to, help resolve conflict and find a path forward. So those things all help. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree to the point, especially if someone believes in the mission, they would like try to adjust around it. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. And again, it's we learn as we go. We all do, right? We're we're humans, and every situation that arises can be quite different. But I think coming at it from a place of mutual respect, hopefully, and wanting the best for everybody and the success for the company and for the mission that we have, that helps ground everybody in the right place.
Okay, thank you.
So, Tara, it must be a lot of responsibility for you to act as the chief business officer of the startup. What are some things that you do outside of work to help ground yourself and to in order to keep that tenacity and that resilience over a long period of time?
Uh, Thank you, Van. That's the human part of challenging and stressful work for all of us. As Himani and I'm sure many others in this space can see, yeah, there are many different professions that push us in different ways. I am, not just the founder, I'm also a mother, and I take great pleasure in spending time with the family, and my child. And I try to really balance those focuses with understanding what really is very important in my life in the large scheme of things and keeping perspective. That helps a lot. I do love nature quite a bit, and I think having intention on staying physically healthy is a very critical aspect. Again, that's about the marathon and not the sprint. That you can't abuse yourself when it comes to eliminating sleep or lacking nutrition and other things. You have to tend to yourself so that you're able to perform as best as you can for the long term. So those are pretty critical things that I try. Sometimes it's better than others, but it's always the endeavor. Yeah. Kat, I forgive me for calling you out. I appreciate you being in the audience, and you've been kind enough to to be on camera. Can I ask what your perspective is?
Well, I'm here mostly just to learn. I do service design and UX advising, so I'm curious about, I'm just always curious about this whole world of med tech. And yeah, I was actually wondering if you could talk a little bit about like you have this, this imaging hardware, but I'm curious about like the interfaces and your how you do that kind of development. I was checking out your website and you have like a head of software. Does he do all the work? Do you have a team? Do you work like sort of agile? Like I'm just curious about that process.
Yeah, it is. We do employ agile, methodology in a lot of
Mhm.
our management. And interestingly, because of my own background, I have a lot of input when it comes to uh, our control software and the visual look and feel and its
Mhm.
functionality. And so we do many things as a team, kind of drawing on everybody's expertise and input. But when it comes to matters that touch on the human and human interaction, that's where I have strong voice with intention.
Mhm.
In our space, there is a primary concern when you're dealing with medical imaging of a person, and you want to make sure that's as safe as possible, in that you have to really prioritize, say, function over beauty. Uh,
Mhm.
and so aesthetics should be clean and facilitate the function rather than taking the primary aim.
Mhm.
There is a lot of rigor that goes into the assurance of function and making the process. For us, our approach is one of creating it as a very procedural process that's guided through, that is not easily deviated from.
Mhm.
If we respect what is going on when a technologist is actually taking a person in to go through a medical imaging procedure, they are juggling quite a bit as a human. It's a heavy, as I would say, cognitive load, right? They're trying to have good bedside manner. They're trying to guide a person based on the signal that they get from them and what the procedure is. They may be new to the procedure. They're giving them instruction, right? Some people are better at juggling all of these tasks at once. And then when you get to actually operating of the device and the control, you don't want that to be the place where, it's noisy as well and very confusing and there's a lot of decision making. So instead,
Mhm.
our focus is on making that streamlined, intuitive, progressive through steps. and accommodating what is the natural in the clinic experience. So if you are going to have a pause and it's known that you'll be interacting with, the patient or the person coming in for imaging at this point, the software should accommodate and pause for that, right? And allow you space to do what you need to do. So those are things that are thoughtfully done. Whereas, in other realms, a lot of the user experience might be to delight and awe and astound with beauty. And
yeah, I could see that, making sure that the experience is performant, that it's responsive and it's real time, and you're not building it so that the interface gets in the way of analysis and diagnosis. I can see that being important.
Yeah, and go ahead.
So really understanding more the service design, because that's another thing I do, is sort of service design, is looking, across an ecosystem and seeing, what is the end-to-end journey of the technician, of the patient, and then mapping all that out. So understanding, like, where does the technology come into play? What is that experience for people? It's super key to map it so people can have a conversation together before you start building an experience out.
I appreciate your comments, and I think in in your space, as in ours, which obviously there are a lot of overlaps, it is so critical to get a lot of feedback from the key parties of interest, right? Any stakeholder in that, and to get outside of our own thoughts and this makes sense to me, or I think that this is intuitive, and feedback as well as testing, right? But we've leaned very heavily on trying to conduct many interviews. We call it customer discovery, right? Doing a lot of that earlier, so that you are not spending a lot of resource and time on designing something that's just somebody could have told you was an obvious misfit for them in many ways.
Yeah. We call it designing on guesses, like, or assumptions. Yeah. So shameless plug, if anybody ever needs help with that, feel free to reach out. I partner with founders in early stage technology. Happy to help any of you. Happy to help.
One quick question, or one more quick question, with regard to, with regard to the stroke imaging, that I love, obviously the breast is the single focus right now, but as you start thinking about the stroke imaging, what comes to my mind is, I feel like the Valhalla piece is like brain mapping, right? And kind of understanding, like, could it mean detection for TBIs, all of these, because I'm looking at it from a cognitive perspective as well. And I think it's super interesting because there are so many challenges, both with stroke, as well as TBIs, but anything brain mapping. Is there a there as well?
It's so for just those who don't know, TBI is traumatic brain injury, which is of major concern when we think about both sports players, but also people that are in the military or who might be in combat situations. Especially because in those instances, it's often younger folks who are dealing with some trauma that can really impact their brain health and have very detrimental effects for a long span of their life, especially if it's not identified at an early stage. And so, Deanna, it's a lovely question. When we think about the different types of imaging technologies that are available to us and the different uses that they're put to, in our space, because we're utilizing, X-ray based imaging photons, and that does introduce a radiation dose to the patient, there's a balance of ensuring that you're only utilizing these systems when the information that you're getting is absolutely critical gain. And so our system is incredibly low dose exposure, but you take anything seriously, right? And you want to be very responsible about it. There's some technologies, for instance, MRI and the functional usage of MRI that have been long, utilized in mapping of the brain and in trying to understand at a high course scale connections and dynamics. And that is more appropriate for research-based use of trying to understand the living brain rather than ours. One of the benefits of our type of technology is how rapid it is and how highly detailed. But again, because it is fast, highly detailed, but comes with a bit of risk, is why it's a technology that's restricted to the clinic and use in the clinic. And it's not to be used in any kind of cavalier fashion, because always, a physician, right, who's managing the care of a person is making a judgment on the cost benefit, right? Okay, is the information I'm gaining here potentially going to lead to diagnosis that's life-saving? We really look at stroke in particular. The current standard of care imposes a very heavy radiation dose on patients. And so one of the key places that we have the potential to really benefit people is because we're able to deliver such high quality, highly detailed information with a very tiny fraction of the dose of what the standard of care process is today. So that's one of the other reasons that that's a big target for us, because breast cancer and stroke are occurring at younger and younger ages and more people. And you want to be doing the best you can when you know somebody has a lot of life ahead of them, hopefully, right? So yeah, it really is a critical consideration, right? Yeah. So thanks for raising that.
Thank you, everyone. We're at the top of the hour, so let's wrap up. Thank you so much, Tara, for your talk and for mentoring us for the last half hour. It was tremendously informative and useful, and we're so grateful, everyone. So in the next 2 weeks, we have another talk coming up with Jennifer Gibson. She's going to be talking about designing human-centered AI in health tech, and that's taking place on Tuesday, March 31st. On April 28th, we're holding the in-person pitch event in San Francisco. It's going to be at Perkins Coie. We're inviting startups to apply, and out of the cohort, we're going to invite 5 to pitch on the day of. So you're all welcome to apply. And if you have any questions, please do feel free to reach out.
Thank you, everyone, for your attention. And thank you again, Van.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.